Lee Minho pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship. His breath made a small cloud on the cold glass as he stared at the massive structure ahead. The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences looked like a city floating in space. Bright lights dotted its surface like stars, and ships moved around it like tiny insects. "First time seeing the Academy?" asked the pilot, a friendly blue-skinned alien with 4 eyes. "Yes, sir," Minho replied, trying to keep his voice steady. His hands were sweating as he gripped his old duffel bag tighter. Everything he owned was in that bag. Well, almost everything. He touched his grandfather's mechanical watch on his wrist. It was the only thing left from home that felt real. The transport ship docked with a soft bump. Minho thanked the pilot and stepped into the docking bay. The air tasted different here, cleaner somehow, but also strange. He could smell things he had no names for. The docking bay was huge. Minho had never seen a ceiling so high. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked around him. Some looked almost human, just with different colored skin or extra arms. Others looked nothing like anything he had ever seen on Earth. A tall creature made of what looked like living crystal walked past him. Its body caught the light and threw. Rainbows on the walls. Behind it followed a group of smaller beings that seemed to be made of glowing gas. They floated instead of walking. Minho pulled out a small data pad. According to his schedule, he needed to find Building 7, Room 342. Advanced problem-solving theory with Instructor Kalen. He looked around for signs, but everything was written in symbols he could not read. "Excuse me," he said to a passing student. The student looked human except for the pointed ears and silver eyes. "Can you help me find Building 7? The student looked at him with curiosity. "You must be the new human student. I heard you were coming. Follow the blue lights on the floor. They will take you there." Minho looked down. Sure enough, thin blue lines of light ran along the floor like glowing paths. "Thank you," he said. "Good luck," the student replied. "You will need it with Instructor Kalen. They are tough but fair." Minho followed the blue lights through corridors that seemed to go on forever. The walls were covered with screens showing information in dozens of different languages. Some showed star maps. Others showed what looked like scientific formulas, but with symbols he did not recognize. Students filled the hallways. Minho saw creatures with fur, scales, feathers, and some with no covering at all. Some had 2 legs like him, others had 4 or 6 or even more. A few seemed to float or slide instead of walk. Everyone seemed to know where they were going except him. They moved with purpose while he stumbled along following his blue line. Some students stared at him as he passed. He heard whispers in languages. That sounded like music, clicks, or electronic beeps. Finally, he reached Building 7. The blue line led him up 3 levels and down another long corridor. Room 342 was at the end. Minho stood outside the door for a moment, taking deep breaths. Through the small window, he could see students already seated inside. He touched his grandfather's watch again. His grandfather had always said that being different was not something to hide from. It was something to learn from. Minho opened the door. The classroom was larger than he expected. Seats were arranged in a circle, but they were all different shapes and sizes. Some looked like normal chairs. Others looked like platforms or cushions or even hanging nets. Each one was designed for a different type of body. About 20 students were already there. Minho quickly counted 12 different species. At least he thought they were different species. Some might have been the same species with different features. At the center of the circle stood Instructor Kalen. Minho had read about Zephyrians in his prep materials, but seeing one in person was different. Kalen was tall and thin with 4 arms that moved independently of each other. Their skin was pale blue, but as Minho watched, it shifted to light green. "Ah, our new student arrives," Instructor Kalen said. Their voice was smooth and musical. "Class, we have a special guest today. This is Lee Minho from Earth. He is only the third human to ever attend our academy." Minho felt every eye in the room turn to him. Some eyes were familiar. Others were compound, like an insect's. A few students seemed to see him with organs that were not eyes at all. "Please take a seat," Instructor Kalen continued. "But first, as is our tradition for all new students, we have a small challenge." The instructor's skin shifted to a warmer yellow color. Two of their arms reached into a cabinet and pulled out an object that made several students gasp. It was a cube about the size of Minho's head. But it was not a simple cube. Its surface was covered with symbols that seemed to move and change. Mechanical parts stuck out from various sides. Some parts rotated slowly while others clicked and hummed. "This is the Corvash puzzle box," Instructor Kalen announced. "It is over 3,000 years old. Created by the ancient Corvash civilization, it has challenged some of the greatest minds in galactic history." Minho stared at the object. It was beautiful in a complex way, like looking at a piece of art and a machine at the same time. "The puzzle teaches us about patience, logic, and the importance of understanding before action," the instructor continued. "Most students work on it for weeks, some for months. A few exceptional individuals have solved it in days." Instructor Kalen set the puzzle box on a small table in front of the empty seats. "Minho, when you are ready, you may examine the puzzle. Take your time. There is no pressure to solve it quickly. The learning is in the attempt." Minho walked forward. The other students watched in silence. He could feel their curiosity and maybe some pity. They probably expected him to struggle with it like everyone else. He picked up the puzzle box. It was heavier than he expected and warm to the touch. The symbols on its surface were unlike anything he had seen before, but somehow they felt familiar, like a pattern his brain almost recognized. As Instructor Kalen began to speak about the puzzle's history and the lessons it taught, Minho turned the cube in his hands. His fingers found grooves and pressure points. The mechanical parts seemed to follow a rhythm. It reminded him of something, his grandfather's old music box that he used to play with as a child. That box had a trick to it, too. You had to press two spots at the same time while turning a third part. Without really thinking about it, Minho pressed two symbols that felt right under his fingers. At the same time, he rotated a section on the top of the cube. The box made a soft musical chime and opened like a flower blooming. The classroom went completely silent. Instructor Kalen stopped talking mid-sentence. Their skin flashed through several colors quickly, white, then purple, then bright orange. Minho looked around the room. Every student was staring at him with expressions he could not read. Some mouths were open. Others were making soft sounds of amazement. "How long did that take?" whispered a student with green fur. Another student, one that looked almost human except for silver skin, checked a device on their wrist. 14 seconds, they said in a voice full of disbelief. Minho looked down at the open puzzle box in his hands. Had he done something wrong? He carefully closed it and set it back on the table. Then he walked to an empty seat and sat down. He said quietly. "Sorry if I was not supposed to open it so quickly. Should I put it back together?" The silence stretched on. Instructor Kalen's skin was now shifting between colors so fast. It looked like a light show. Finally, they found their voice. "In 3,000 years, the instructor said slowly, no one has ever solved the Corvash puzzle box in under a minute. The previous record was 6 hours, set by a graduate student from the Altarian Empire." Minho shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I think I just got lucky," he said. But as he looked around the room at the faces staring back at him, he realized that his life at the Galactic Academy was going to be anything but simple. Ripples of disbelief. The silence in the classroom broke like a dam bursting. Students started talking all at once in at least 6 different languages. Some made clicking sounds, others produced musical tones, and a few created noises that sounded like static electricity. Instructor Kalen raised all 4 arms to get attention. Their skin was still flashing colors rapidly. "Class, please, let us return to our lesson." But no one was listening. A student with compound eyes like a giant insect kept staring at Minho and making rapid clicking sounds to their neighbor. 2 crystalline beings were creating light patterns that seemed to be some form of communication. "Instructor Kalen," called out a student near the back. She looked almost human except for pointed ears and silver eyes. "How is this possible? The Corvash puzzle box has challenged students for centuries." "Yeah," added another student who had blue fur covering his entire body. "My older brother studied here 5 years ago. He worked on that puzzle for 3 months and never solved it." Instructor Kalen's skin finally settled on a deep purple color. In their species, Minho had read, purple meant confusion mixed with interest. "I admit this is unusual," the instructor said carefully. "Perhaps we should examine what happened more closely." But the questions kept coming from all directions. Did he cheat somehow? Maybe the puzzle was broken? Are humans really that smart? I heard Earth is still a primitive planet. Minho felt his face getting hot. He wanted to disappear into his seat. This was not how he had imagined his first day going. "That is enough," Instructor Kalen said firmly. Their skin flashed to bright red, which Minho guessed meant they were getting angry. "Mr. Lee, would you please stay after class? Everyone else? We have actual coursework to complete." The rest of the class dragged on forever. Minho could barely concentrate on the lesson about multidimensional problem solving. He kept feeling eyes on him and hearing whispered conversations in languages he could not understand. When class finally ended, students filed out slowly. Many kept looking back at him. The student with silver eyes and pointed ears stopped by his desk. "I am Kim Sora," she said in perfect English. "Welcome to the academy. That was quite impressive." "Thank you," Minho said. I am still not sure what happened." "You solved a puzzle that has been unsolved by some of the smartest beings in the galaxy," Sora said. "Trust me, people will be talking about this." After she left, only Minho and Instructor Kalen remained in the classroom. The instructor walked over and sat in the chair next to him. Up close, Minho could see that their skin was covered in tiny scales that caught the light. "Tell me about yourself, Minho," Instructor Kalen said gently. "What is your background on Earth?" Minho shrugged. "Nothing special. I grew up in a small town. My grandfather fixed old machines for a living. He taught me to work with my hands and think about how things fit together." "And your education?" "Standard Earth schooling. I was good at math and science, but not amazing. I liked puzzles and building things." Minho paused. "Instructor, did I do something wrong?" Kalen's skin shifted to a softer green. "Not wrong exactly. But what you did should have been impossible. The Corvash puzzle box is not just difficult. It requires understanding of advanced mathematical principles, spatial reasoning, and cultural knowledge of the Corvash civilization." "I did not think about any of that stuff," Minho admitted. "It just felt like a mechanical puzzle, like the old music box my grandfather had." "Music box?" Kalen's skin brightened with interest. "Yeah. It had a trick mechanism. You had to press certain spots while turning a dial. The rhythm was important too." Minho looked at the puzzle box still sitting on the table. This felt similar. The symbols were moving in patterns. The mechanical parts had a rhythm. I just followed what felt right. Instructor Kalen was quiet for a long moment. Their skin cycled through several colors that Minho could not identify. "Minho, I need to ask you to be very careful here at the academy," they finally said. "What you did today will spread through the school quickly, Some people will be impressed. Others might be suspicious or even hostile. Hostile? Why? Because you have challenged assumptions about human intelligence. Some species have built their reputations on being the smartest in the galaxy. If a human from what they consider a primitive world can solve problems they cannot, it threatens their sense of superiority. As if summoned by their conversation, the classroom door opened. A tall figure entered wearing the robes of a senior faculty member. This being was humanoid, but clearly not human. Their skin was pale gray and their head was larger than normal, with no hair. Their eyes were completely black. "Instructor Kalen," the newcomer said in a cold voice. "I am Professor Zekthos of the Altarian Institute. I heard there was some commotion in your class today." Kalen's skin immediately turned a cautious orange. "Professor Zekthos. Yes, we had an interesting demonstration of problem-solving techniques. Professor..." Zekthos looked at Minho with those black eyes. Minho felt like he was being examined under a microscope. "So this is the human who claims to have solved the Corvash puzzle," Zekthos said. "How convenient that no one was timing the attempt properly. How convenient that it happened so quickly that few could observe the method." "Several students recorded the time," Kalen said carefully. "And the solution was quite clear." "Was it?" Zekthos walked over to the puzzle box. "Perhaps the mechanism was damaged. These old artifacts can become unreliable." He picked up the box and examined it closely. Then he began working on it himself, his long fingers moving over the symbols and mechanical parts. Minho watched as the professor tried various combinations and approaches. After several minutes, Zekthos set the box down with obvious frustration. "The mechanism appears to be functioning normally," he admitted. "Professor, is there something specific you wanted to discuss?" Kalen asked. Zekthos turned his attention back to Minho. "I wanted to meet our newest student and remind him that the Academy has high standards. We expect all students to earn their achievements through proper study and dedication, not through luck or tricks." "I understand, sir," Minho said quietly. "Do you? The Altarian Empire has produced some of the galaxy's greatest minds. Our students spend years mastering the fundamentals before attempting advanced challenges. We do not appreciate shortcuts or showmanship." Instructor Kalen's skin flashed warning colors. "Professor Zekthos, Mr. Lee has done nothing wrong. He was completing a standard new student exercise." "Of course," Zekthos said with a thin smile. "I simply want to ensure our human friend understands the environment he has entered. The Academy is not like the primitive schools of Earth. Here we value substance over spectacle." After he left, the room felt cold despite the warm lighting. "Do not let him bother you too much," Kalen said softly. "Professor Zekthos represents the old way of thinking, but he has influence, and he will be watching you closely." "Great," Minho muttered. "I have been here one day and I already have enemies." "Not enemies, just people who are afraid of change." Kalen stood up. "But you also have allies, more than you might think." As if to prove the point, Kim Sora appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "Minho, there are some people who want to meet you. Other human students and some friends who are interested in what happened today." "Other humans?" Minho perked up. "Two others," Sora confirmed. "Park Jiho has been here for 2 years. He can tell you what you need to know about Academy life. And there is Yoon Dayun, a research assistant who studies different species learning methods." Instructor Kalen nodded approvingly. "Go ahead, Minho, but remember what we discussed. Be careful who you trust, and try not to draw too much attention to yourself." As they walked through the corridors toward the student common area, Sora filled him in on Academy politics. "There are basically 3 groups here," she explained. "The traditionalists like Professor Zekthos who believe the older species are naturally superior, the progressives who think all species have unique strengths, and the neutrals who just want to study and avoid drama." "Which group are you in?" Minho asked. Sora smiled. I am half Zephyrian and half human. I do not have a choice but to be progressive. The traditionalists barely tolerate my existence here. They entered a large common area filled with comfortable seating areas and small tables. Students from various species sat in mixed groups, some studying, others just talking. In a corner booth, Minho saw two humans waiting for them. The first was a young man about his own age with kind eyes and a worried expression. The second was a woman a few years older who was taking notes on a data pad. Minho, Sora said. Meet Park Jiho and Yoon Dae-yoon, your fellow humans. Jiho stood up and shook his hand. Welcome to the academy, he said. Though I have to warn you, your first day has already caused quite a stir. That seems to be the theme, Minho replied. Dae-yoon looked up from her notes. 14 seconds, she said with amazement. I have been researching human cognitive abilities for 3 years, and I have never seen anything like that. Tell me, how did you approach the puzzle? As Minho sat down with his new friends, he realized that his simple desire to study at the academy had somehow turned into something much bigger. Word of the puzzle box was spreading through the school, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about what it meant. He just hoped he was ready for whatever came next. 3 weeks had passed since the puzzle box incident, and Minho was starting to feel at home in the academy. He had made friends with students from 6 different species and was keeping up with his coursework. But something strange kept happening. In his classes, it started in advanced engineering theory. Professor Vex, a friendly insectoid with 6 arms, presented the class with a broken fusion reactor simulation. The problem had stumped graduate students for months. While his classmates spent hours analyzing the technical specifications, Minho looked at the energy flow patterns and noticed they looked like water trying to flow uphill. What if we reverse the polarity in Section 7 and add a buffer in Section 12? He suggested during a study group. His classmates stared at him. That would never work, said Bae Tae-hyun, an Altarian student who had slowly warmed up to Minho. The power requirements alone would be impossible. But when they tested it in the simulation, the reactor not only worked, but operated at 15% higher efficiency than the original design. The same thing happened in strategic planning class. While other students spent days analyzing battle formations from ancient wars, Minho saw patterns that reminded him of playground games and sports tactics from Earth. His unconventional solutions consistently outperformed traditional approaches. I do not understand it, Jiho said one evening as they sat in the common area. You are solving problems that should require years of specialized study. How are you doing it? Minho shrugged. I honestly do not know. I just look at things and see patterns. Like that reactor problem. The energy flows looked wrong, like trying to pour water upward. So I thought about what would happen if we redirected the flow. But you had no formal training in fusion reactor design, Daeun said, looking up from her research notes. You should not have been able to visualize energy flow patterns at all. Maybe that is why it worked, suggested Sora. You were not limited by what you were supposed to think. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Choi Min-jun, an older man who worked in academy maintenance. He often joined their group, during his breaks, sharing stories about the academy's history and politics. I heard Professor Zekthos is not happy about your latest success, Min-jun said to Minho. Word is he is planning something to prove that humans are not as smart as people are starting to think. What kind of something? Minho asked nervously. He has been talking to the Academy Board about special testing, claims that your successes are just luck, and that proper evaluation would reveal human limitations. Daeun frowned. That could be dangerous. If they decide humans are not qualified for advanced study, they could cancel the entire exchange program. Not just that, Jiho added quietly. I have heard rumors that some species are starting to worry about human capabilities. If we appear too successful too quickly, it might cause problems for Earth's relations with the galactic community. That night, Minho could not sleep. He stared out his dormitory window at the stars, thinking about home. He had come to the academy to learn, not to cause political problems. Maybe he should try to keep a lower profile. But the next day in xenobiology class, Professor Yara presented them with a disease that was killing crops on 3 different planets. The local scientists had been working on it for 2 years, with no success. As Minho studied the data, he noticed something that reminded him of crop rotation practices his grandfather had told him about. Earth farmers had learned centuries ago that planting the same crop repeatedly would exhaust the soil and make plants vulnerable to disease. What if the problem is not the disease itself, but the farming methods? He asked. These planets are all growing monocultures, single crops across huge areas. On Earth, we learned that diversity makes crops stronger. Professor Yara's tentacles twitched with interest. Explain further. If they rotated between 3 different crops and planted them in smaller mixed fields, the disease might not be able to spread as easily. The soil would be healthier too. The professor's tentacles moved faster, which Minho had learned meant excitement. That is brilliant in its simplicity. Why did no one think of this before? Because, said Han Yuna, a diplomatic student who had become one of Minho's closest friends, the agricultural specialists were all looking for complex technological solutions. They assumed that advanced civilizations needed advanced answers. After class, Professor Yara asked Minho to stay behind. Your solution could save millions of lives and prevent food shortages on 3 worlds. I am forwarding your proposal to the Galactic Agricultural Council immediately. But Minho felt more worried than proud. Professor, I am starting to think I should stop offering solutions. People are getting upset about it. Upset? Professor Yara's tentacles curled in confusion. Why would saving lives upset anyone? Because I am human. Some people think humans should not be able to solve problems that their experts cannot. Professor Yara was quiet for a moment. Minho, can I share something with you? I have been studying human cognitive patterns since you arrived. I think I am beginning to understand what makes your species unique. What do you mean? Most species in the galaxy evolved to become specialists. Altarians developed incredible memory and logical processing. Zephyrians became masters of pattern recognition in their specific domains. Crystalline species excel at mathematical calculations. Professor Yara moved closer, their tentacles waving gently. But humans evolved differently. Your species had to survive on a dangerous planet with no natural advantages, no claws, no armor, no specialized organs. So your brains developed to be generalists. You learned to see connections between different types of problems. I still do not understand why that matters. Because most galactic citizens think in very structured ways. When they see an engineering problem, they use engineering thinking. When they see a biological problem, they use biological thinking. But you see patterns that cross between different fields. That afternoon, Minho met with Instructor Kalen for their weekly check-in. The instructor's skin was a concerned blue color. Minho, I need to warn you about something, Kalen said. Professor Zekthos has convinced the Academy Board to authorize special testing for you. What kind of testing? The trials of Xenarch. They are designed for postgraduate students who want to qualify for the most advanced research positions. The trials test every aspect of cognitive ability. Minho felt his stomach drop. How hard are they? Very hard. They were created to identify the absolute best minds from each species. Most candidates spend months preparing. Many never pass at all. And if I fail, Professor Zekthos will use it as proof that human success here is just luck. It could end the exchange program and damage Earth's reputation in the galactic community. When do I have to take them? Next week. You have 6 days to prepare. That evening, Minho's friends gathered in the common area to help him study. Jiho brought textbooks on advanced mathematics. Sora had data files on multidimensional physics. Dayun carried research on cognitive enhancement techniques. "This is hopeless," Minho said, after looking through the materials. "I cannot learn years of advanced theory in 6 days." "Maybe you do not need to," Yuna said thoughtfully. "Professor Yara said your strength is seeing connections across different fields. What if we focus on that instead of trying to memorize specific knowledge?" "How?" "Tell us how you solved the puzzle box again," Sora suggested, "and the reactor problem. Walk us through your thinking process." As Minho explained his approach to each problem, his friends began to see patterns. He did not think in straight lines like most people. Instead, he connected ideas from completely different areas. "You treated the fusion reactor like a water system," Taehyun observed. "And the crop disease like an earth farming problem. You keep using familiar concepts to understand unfamiliar situations." "That is it," Daeun said excitedly. "Your brain takes complex problems and finds simple analogies. You translate alien concepts into human terms. So how do we prepare for trials that could cover any topic in the galaxy?" Jiho asked. Minjun, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Maybe the preparation is not about learning new information. Maybe it is about trusting the way your mind already works." "What do you mean?" "I have worked here for 20 years. I have seen thousands of brilliant students take various tests and trials. The ones who succeed are not always the ones who know the most facts. They are the ones who can think clearly under pressure and find new ways to approach problems." Sora nodded slowly. "Minjun is right. The trials are not just about knowledge. They test creativity, adaptability, and problem-solving under stress. Those are things you already do well." "But what if I fail anyway?" Minho asked. "What if Professor Zekthos is right and I have just been lucky?" "Then you fail," Yuna said simply. "But at least you will fail while being true to yourself. Trying to become something you are not would guarantee failure." Over the next few days, instead of cramming facts and formulas, Minho's friends helped him practice thinking through problems from different angles. They gave him challenges from various fields and encouraged him to find connections to things he already understood. Slowly, Minho began to feel more confident. He might not know advanced theoretical physics, but he understood how things moved and connected. He might not have studied alien psychology, but he had learned to read people and understand motivations. The night before the trials, Instructor Kalen stopped by his dormitory. "How are you feeling?" they asked, their skin showing calming green tones. "Nervous but ready, I think," Minho replied. "I have decided to trust my instincts and see what happens." "That is wise. Can I tell you something that might help?" "Please." The trials of Xenarch were not originally designed to test memorized knowledge. They were created to find individuals who could solve problems that had never been solved before. The emphasis on specialized knowledge came later, when certain species wanted to ensure their students had advantages. Kalen's skin shifted to a more confident yellow. "Tomorrow, try to remember that you are not taking a test designed for Altarians or Zephyrians or any other species. You are taking a test designed to find new ways of thinking. And if my way of thinking is not good enough, then the test is wrong, not you." As Minho prepared for bed, he thought about everything that had brought him to this point. 3 weeks ago, he had been just another exchange student trying to fit in. Now he was about to take trials that could determine not just his future, but possibly the future of human participation in galactic society. He touched his grandfather's watch and tried to remember the old man's advice about being different. Tomorrow, he would find out if being human was enough. The morning of the trials arrived gray and cold. Minho woke before his alarm, his stomach churning with nervousness. He had barely slept, his mind spinning with worries about what the day would bring. He dressed in his best clothes and checked his grandfather's watch. 7 in the morning. The trials would begin at 9. In the cafeteria, his friends had gathered to see him off. Jiho pushed a cup of earth coffee toward him, somehow obtained from the Academy's special dietary section. "You need to eat something," Sora said, but her own breakfast sat untouched on her tray. "I cannot. My stomach feels like it is full of rocks," Minho replied. Yuna sat down beside him. "Remember what we practiced? Do not overthink. Trust your instincts." Easy for you to say. You are not the one who might embarrass an entire planet today. Minjin appeared at their table, carrying a steaming mug of something that smelled like herbs. "Drink this. It will calm your nerves without making you sleepy." "Thanks." Minho sipped the warm liquid. It tasted bitter, but somehow comforting. At 8:30, Instructor Kalen arrived to escort him to the testing center. Their skin was a neutral gray color, which Minho had learned meant they were trying to hide their emotions. "Are you ready?" Kalen asked. "As ready as I can be." The testing center was in the Academy's oldest building, deep underground. They walked through corridors lined with portraits of famous graduates from across the centuries. Minho tried not to think about how many brilliant minds had walked these same halls. "Instructor," he said as they descended another level, "can you tell me what to expect?" 5 trials, each testing different aspects of cognitive ability. You will have as much time as you need for each one, but most candidates take several hours per trial. "What kind of trials?" "I cannot give specifics, but I can tell you they test logic, creativity, spatial reasoning, pattern recognition, and synthesis of complex information." They reached a heavy door marked with symbols in dozens of languages. All of them seemed to say the same thing: testing in progress, do not disturb. Inside, Minho found himself in a circular room with a high ceiling. 5 doors led off from the main chamber, each marked with a different symbol. In the center sat a panel of 3 judges. Professor Zekthos was there, of course, his black eyes cold and calculating. Beside him sat Director Vormak, an ancient Etherian, whose body seemed to be made of shifting energy. The 3rd judge was someone Minho did not recognize, a being covered in what looked like living metal plates. "Mr. Lee," Director Vormak spoke in a voice like wind chimes, "welcome to the trials of Xenarch. These tests have been used for over 1,000 years to identify exceptional cognitive abilities. You may attempt the trials in any order you choose." Professor Zekthos leaned forward. "I should mention that in the history of these trials, no first-year student has ever passed all 5. Most graduate students attempt only 2 or 3. "I understand," Minho said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You may begin when ready," the metal-plated judge said in a voice like grinding gears. Minho looked at the 5 doors. Each one probably contained challenges that had stumped some of the galaxy's brightest minds. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of his grandfather's advice about taking things one step at a time. He chose the door on the far left. The first trial was called the Quantum Maze. Minho found himself in a room filled with what looked like floating geometric shapes that constantly shifted and changed. A holographic display explained that he needed to navigate from one end of the room to the other, but the path existed in 11 dimensions. Most candidates would spend hours trying to understand the mathematical principles involved. Minho stared at the shifting shapes for several minutes, then closed his eyes and listened. The shapes made soft humming sounds as they moved. After a while, he began to hear a pattern, like music with a complex rhythm. He opened his eyes and started moving, not thinking about mathematics, but following the rhythm of the sounds. When a shape hummed in a higher tone, he stepped left. Lower tones meant step right. He moved through the maze like he was dancing to music only he could hear. In 23 minutes, he reached the other side. The second trial was the diplomatic paradox. 3 alien species had been fighting over territorial rights for centuries. Thousands of diplomats had tried to solve the conflict. Minho was given all their records and asked to find a solution. He spent an hour reading through the history, then set aside all the diplomatic documents. Instead, he started drawing pictures of the three species and their homeworlds. The Korthans were miners who lived underground. The Valari were farmers who needed lots of surface area. The Zinthi were traders who wanted access to transportation routes. Looking at his simple drawings, Minho realized something that centuries of complex negotiations had missed. The three species were not really fighting over the same things. They just thought they were. He proposed a three-dimensional solution. Korthans get underground mining rights, Valari get surface farming rights, and Zinthi get aerial and orbital transportation corridors. Each species could have what they actually needed without interfering with the others. The third trial was called the Engineering Impossibility. Minho was presented with a box full of mechanical parts that seemed to come from completely different technologies. Some looked like they belonged on a spaceship, others like they came from ancient clockwork devices. His task was to build something functional from the random assortment. Most candidates tried to figure out what each part was designed for originally. Minho just started connecting things to see what would happen. He built a device that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. It had gears from an ancient clock connected to crystal power cells, with organic-looking tubes linking everything together. When he activated it, the device created a perfect holographic sphere that displayed the current time on a dozen different worlds simultaneously. "How did you know those parts would work together?" asked the metal judge when Minho emerged from the trial room. "I did not. I just tried different combinations until something interesting happened." The fourth trial was the Strategic Infinity Game. Minho found himself in command of a space fleet facing an enemy force. The simulation had been running for decades with no candidate ever finding a winning strategy. Instead of trying to defeat the enemy fleet, Minho opened communications and asked why they were fighting. The artificial intelligence running the enemy side paused for a long moment, then admitted it had forgotten the original reason for the conflict. Minho convinced both sides to form an alliance and explore the galaxy together instead of fighting over one small sector. The simulation declared victory through unprecedented cooperation. The fifth and final trial was called the Void Question. Minho was placed in a completely empty room with no tools, no information, and no instructions. Previous candidates had spent days meditating, trying to figure out what they were supposed to do. Minho sat in the empty room for an hour, thinking. Then he started talking to the walls. "I think the question is not what I should do in here," he said out loud. "The question is why you put me in here in the first place." He continued talking, explaining his theory that the trial was not about solving a problem, but about how someone reacts when faced with complete uncertainty. Some people would panic. Others would become paralyzed by indecision. But the most useful response was to stay calm and try to understand the situation. After 4 hours of thinking out loud and exploring every inch of the room, Minho knocked on the door. When it opened, he found the 3 judges waiting for him. "I think I understand now," he said. "This trial is not about finding the right answer. It is about how you handle not knowing what the question is." Director Vormak's energy form seemed to brighten. "Explain further. In real life, we often face problems where we do not have enough information or clear instructions. The ability to stay calm, think clearly, and keep trying different approaches is more valuable than having all the answers." Professor Zekthos looked like he had swallowed something sour. "And what makes you think your approach was correct?" "I do not know if it was correct," Minho admitted, "but it was honest. I did the best I could with what I had." The metal judge made grinding sounds that might have been laughter. In 500 years of administering these trials, no candidate has ever acknowledged that they might be wrong while still defending their approach. Director Vormak floated closer to Minho. "Young human, you have completed all 5 trials in a single day. Most candidates take weeks to finish even 3. "Did I pass?" Minho asked nervously. You did not just pass, Director Vormak said with what sounded like amazement. You set new records in 4 of the 5 trials, and your approach to the 5th trial has made us reconsider how we evaluate that particular challenge. Professor Zekthos stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. He clearly used some kind of primitive intuition instead of proper analytical thinking. Perhaps, said the metal judge, but primitive intuition that solves problems in hours, what our best analytical minds cannot solve in years, deserves respect. I request a review of these results, Zekthos said coldly. Denied, Director Vormak replied firmly. The trials were administered fairly and the results are clear. As they escorted Minho back to the main academy, word of his performance began to spread. Students and faculty member, the news of Minho's trial results spread through the academy like wildfire. By the next morning, students from every species were talking about the human who had broken records that had stood for centuries. In the cafeteria, conversations stopped when Minho entered. Some students stared with admiration. Others whispered among themselves with expressions he could not read. A few got up and left their tables entirely. This is getting uncomfortable, Minho said as he sat down with his friends. You are famous now, Sora said, but she did not sound happy about it. 3 news networks from different star systems have requested interviews. I do not want to be famous. I just want to study. Jiho leaned forward and lowered his voice. It is bigger than that now. I heard 2 professors arguing in the hallway this morning. One said your results prove humans have been underestimated. The other said it proves the trials are flawed. Before Minho could respond, Instructor Kalen approached their table. Their skin was cycling through rapid color changes, which usually meant they were excited about something. Minho, I need to speak with you privately, Kalen said. They walked to an empty classroom where Kalen pulled up a holographic display showing brain scans and cognitive analysis charts. I have been studying your trial performance with some colleagues, Kalen explained. We think we understand why humans like you perform so well on problems that stump other species. I am listening. Most galactic species evolved to become specialists. Altarians developed incredible memory and logical processing. Zephyrians became masters of pattern recognition in specific domains. Vorthak excel at mathematical calculations. Kalen's skin shifted to an excited yellow. But humans evolved differently. Your species survived on a dangerous planet by becoming generalists. Your brains learned to connect information across many different areas and find solutions using whatever was available. So humans are just adaptable? More than that. Your species developed what we are calling cross-domain cognitive flexibility. You can take a problem from one field and solve it using knowledge from a completely different field. Minho thought about this. Like when I treated the fusion reactor like a water system. Exactly. Most species would never make that connection, because their thinking is more compartmentalized. They see engineering problems as engineering problems, biological problems as biological problems. But that seems like a disadvantage. Would not specialists be better at their specific fields? They are, usually. But when facing new types of problems or problems that cross multiple fields, generalist thinking becomes incredibly powerful. Kalen pulled up another display showing publication statistics. I have written a paper about human cognitive architecture. 3 major academic journals want to publish it immediately. Is that good? For science, yes. For you personally? Kalen's skin shifted to a worried orange. It might make your situation more complicated. That afternoon, Minho discovered what Kalen meant. As he walked to his next class, he found Professor Zekthos waiting in the corridor with 2 other faculty members he did not recognize. Mr. Lee, Zekthos said coldly, I would like you to meet Professor Thane from the Rigelian Institute and Professor Vex from the Centaurian Academy. They have come specifically to observe your unique abilities. The two visiting professors looked at Minho like he was a specimen under a microscope. Professor Thane, whose species looked like walking trees with silver bark, spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. We understand you have achieved unprecedented results on the trials of Xenarch. My government is very interested in understanding human cognitive capabilities. Professor Vex, a being covered in crystalline formations, added, Several worlds are questioning whether human intelligence represents a new category that needs to be studied. I am just a student, Minho said uncomfortably. I do not think I represent anything special about humans. Do you not? Professor Zekthos smiled coldly. Then you would not mind taking some additional tests to verify that your results were not simply luck? Minho realized he was being trapped. If he refused, it would look like he had something to hide. If he agreed, he might be setting himself up for failure or making Earth look bad. What kind of tests? He asked carefully. Nothing too strenuous, just some standard cognitive evaluations that we use to assess student capabilities. That evening, Minho met with his friends to discuss the situation. They gathered in Minjun's workshop, a small room filled with broken academy equipment that he was repairing. This is a trap, Yuna said immediately. They want to find some way to discredit your trial results. Maybe, Jiho agreed, but if you refuse, they will say you are afraid of real testing. Daeon looked up from her research notes. I have been tracking the political response to your trial results. At least 6 species have filed formal inquiries about human cognitive abilities. Some are supportive, but others are demanding restrictions on human participation in advanced programs. Restrictions? What kind of restrictions? Limits on what courses humans can take, requirements for additional oversight, even suggestions that humans should be excluded from certain types of research. Minjun stopped working on a broken data pad and turned to face them. There is something else you should know. I have friends in the Academy administration. There is talk of canceling the human exchange program entirely. What? Minho felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Because I did well on some tests? Because some people are afraid of what human success might mean for the established order, Minjun explained. Several species have built their reputations on being the smartest in the galaxy. If humans can outperform their best students, it threatens their sense of superiority. Sora had been quiet during the discussion, but now she spoke up. There is another problem. Some of my Zephyrian relatives have been asking questions about my human heritage. They want to know if I inherited any unusual cognitive abilities. What did you tell them? The truth. That I have always been good at seeing connections between different ideas. But now they are wondering if that comes from my human side. Yuna leaned back in her chair. So Minho is not the only one being affected by this. Anyone with human connections is being scrutinized. What should I do? Minho asked. Take their tests and risk failing? Refuse and look like I have something to hide? Take the tests, Minjun said firmly. But on your terms. What do you mean? Demand that the testing be public and recorded. Insist on having witnesses from multiple species present. Make sure everything is transparent. That way, if you succeed, no one can claim the results were faked, Jiho added. And if you fail, at least everyone will see it was a fair test. Dayun nodded. And I want to be there to document everything. This could be important for understanding human cognitive abilities, regardless of the political implications. The next morning, Minho found Professor Zekthos in his office and agreed to take the additional tests, but with conditions. The testing would be public, recorded, and witnessed by faculty from at least 5 different species. The results would be made available to all Academy students and faculty. Professor Zekthos looked annoyed, but agreed. Very well. We will conduct the testing in 3 days in the main auditorium. I hope you are prepared to prove that your previous success was not merely luck. As word spread about the upcoming public testing, the academy became divided into camps. Some students and faculty supported Minho and were curious about human capabilities. Others felt that humans were getting too much attention and disrupting the natural order of galactic academic hierarchy. Instructor Kalen found Minho that evening, as he was studying in the library. "How are you feeling about the upcoming tests?" they asked, their skin showing concerned blue tones. "Nervous, scared, worried that I might embarrass my entire species in front of hundreds of people. I have a suggestion. Do not think of this as representing all humans. Think of it as representing yourself. What is the difference? If you represent all humans, then any failure reflects on your entire species. That is too much pressure for anyone. But if you represent only yourself, then you just need to do your best with your own abilities." Kalen sat down beside him. "Besides, I have a theory about what will happen." "What theory?" "I think Professor Zekthos is making a mistake. He is designing tests based on traditional approaches to intelligence. But your strength is not traditional intelligence. Your strength is finding new approaches to old problems. So you think I will do well? I think you will surprise everyone, including yourself." The night before the public testing, Minho could not sleep. He walked out onto the Academy's observation deck and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, where people were probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that their entire relationship with the galactic community might be changed by what happened tomorrow. He touched his grandfather's watch and tried to remember what the old man had taught him about facing challenges. Do your best. Be honest. And do not try to be something you are not. Tomorrow, he would find out if being human was enough. The main auditorium was packed. Students from every species filled the seats, while faculty members lined the walls. Minho had never seen so many different types of beings in one place. The air hummed with dozens of languages and the nervous energy of anticipation. At the center of the stage sat a single desk with testing equipment. Professor Zekthos stood nearby with a panel of 5 judges from different species. Director Vormak floated at the side of the stage, their energy form pulsing with what Minho hoped was encouragement. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all classifications," Professor Zekthos announced, "today we will conduct a comprehensive evaluation of human cognitive abilities using standardized testing protocols recognized throughout the galaxy." Minho walked onto the stage, his legs feeling unsteady. In the audience, he could see his friends sitting together in the front row. Instructor Kalen gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. "The test consists of 5 sections," Professor Zekthos continued. "Logic and reasoning, mathematical computation, spatial analysis, memory retention, and pattern recognition. Each section is timed and scored according to galactic standards." The first test was pure logic. Minho was presented with complex logical puzzles that required step-by-step reasoning. This was exactly the kind of test that Altarians excelled at. As he worked through the problems, he could see Professor Zekthos watching him with satisfaction. When time was called, Minho knew he had not performed exceptionally. He had solved most of the problems correctly, but not quickly, and not with the elegant efficiency that specialists might show. The mathematical computation section was even more challenging. Complex equations that required precise calculation and deep understanding of advanced mathematical principles. Again, Minho did well enough, but nothing spectacular. By the third section, spatial analysis, murmurs were starting to spread through the audience. It looked like Professor Zekthos might be right about human limitations. But then something interesting happened during the memory retention test. Instead of trying to memorize random sequences of data like most candidates, Minho started creating stories that connected the information. He turned lists of numbers into narratives and transformed abstract symbols into characters in imaginary adventures. His score on that section was significantly higher than his previous results. The final section was pattern recognition, And this was where everything changed. The test presented a series of complex visual patterns that candidates needed to complete or identify. Most species approached this systematically, analyzing each element and applying mathematical rules to determine the correct answer. Minho looked at the patterns and saw something else entirely. He saw music, movement, growth cycles, weather patterns, and architectural designs all mixed together. Instead of analyzing, he felt the rhythms and flows of the patterns. He completed the section in half the allotted time with perfect accuracy. When the scores were announced, the auditorium fell silent. Minho had performed average on logic and mathematics, well above average on spatial analysis, excellent on memory retention, and off the charts on pattern recognition. Overall, his performance was impressive but not record-breaking. Professor Zekthos looked pleased. As we can see, while Mr. Lee shows competence in certain areas, his performance is well within normal ranges for galactic academic standards. This suggests that his previous exceptional results were indeed anomalous. But Director Vormak floated forward before Zekthos could continue. Professor Zekthos, I believe you are misinterpreting these results, Vormak said in their wind chime voice. Mr. Lee was not given problems to solve. He was given tests designed to measure specific types of intelligence that favor certain species. What do you mean? Watch this. Director Vormak gestured, and the stage equipment reconfigured itself. Mr. Lee, I am going to present you with 5 real problems that the Academy is currently working on. These are not tests with predetermined answers. These are actual challenges that our best researchers have been unable to solve. The first problem appeared on the main display. It was a complex engineering issue involving a space station's life support system that kept failing in ways that made no logical sense. Minho studied the data for a few minutes, then asked, "Can I see the maintenance records for the past year?" After reviewing the information, he said, "I think the problem is not mechanical. Look at the failure patterns. They correlate with shift changes. I think different maintenance teams are using slightly different procedures, and the small variations are creating systemic instabilities." A gasp went through the audience. The engineering faculty had been working on that problem for 8 months. The second problem was a biological puzzle involving a plague affecting crops on multiple worlds. Traditional approaches had failed to identify the cause. Minho looked at the data and said, "This looks like the same pattern we see on Earth with invasive species. The plague is not native to any of these worlds. Someone or something is carrying it between planets." Again, the audience reacted with amazement. The agricultural specialists had been treating it as separate outbreaks rather than connected incidents. The third problem was a diplomatic crisis involving trade disputes between 4 different species. "They are not really fighting about trade," Minho said after reviewing the situation. "They are fighting about respect and recognition. If you address the underlying cultural issues, the trade problems will solve themselves." The fourth problem was a complex scheduling challenge for the Academy's course offerings that had to accommodate dozens of species with different physical and temporal needs. Minho approached it like a puzzle game, creating a visual map of constraints and possibilities. His solution accommodated 15% more students than the current system while reducing conflicts by half. The fifth problem was the most challenging, designing a communication protocol that could work between species that used completely different sensory modalities. Minho thought about it like music, creating a universal rhythm that could be translated into light, sound, touch, chemical signals, or any other sensory format. His solution was elegant in its simplicity. When he finished, the auditorium was completely silent. Director Vormak spoke first. "In 2 hours, Mr. Lee has provided workable solutions to 5 problems that our best specialists have been struggling with for months or years." Professor Zekthos stood up, his face showing confusion and something that might have been respect. "I do not understand. His test scores were good but not exceptional. How is this possible?" Instructor Kalen stood up in the audience. "May I explain?" At Vormak's nod, Kalen walked onto the stage. Their skin was bright with excitement. What we just witnessed demonstrates the difference between testing existing knowledge and applying intelligence to new problems. The standardized tests measured how well someone can perform tasks that favor specific types of cognitive architecture. Kalen gestured toward Minho. But real-world problems require something different. They require the ability to see connections across different domains, to think outside established frameworks, and to find creative solutions using available resources. Humans evolved as generalist problem solvers, Kalen continued. Their cognitive architecture is optimized for adaptation and creative synthesis rather than specialized processing. This makes them extraordinarily valuable for solving novel problems. A student in the audience called out, "But does that make humans superior to other species?" Minho stepped forward to answer. "No, it makes us different. Every species here today has cognitive strengths that I could never match. Altarians can process logical sequences faster than I can think. Zephyrians can see patterns in their domains that I would miss completely." He looked around the auditorium. But maybe that is the point. Maybe the goal should not be to prove which species is smartest. Maybe the goal should be to find ways to combine our different strengths. Director Vormak's energy form brightened considerably. An interesting perspective. How do you suggest we do that? Change how we teach and learn. Instead of having students compete to prove they are better than others, have them work together to solve problems that none of them could solve alone. Over the following weeks, word of the public demonstration spread throughout the galactic academic community. The response was dramatic and immediate. 3 major universities requested to establish exchange programs with Earth. The Galactic Research Council invited human observers to join their problem-solving committees. Most importantly, the Academy began restructuring its curriculum to emphasize collaborative learning and cross-domain thinking. Professor Zekthos, to everyone's surprise, became one of the strongest advocates for the new approach. After working with human students on several projects, he admitted that his own analytical skills were enhanced when combined with human creative thinking. "I was wrong to see this as a competition," he told Minho one day in the library. "Intelligence is not a zero-sum game. When different minds work together, everyone becomes smarter." 6 months later, Minho found himself back in the same classroom where everything had started. But now he was not just a student. He was a teaching assistant, helping Instructor Kalen introduce new students to collaborative problem-solving approaches. The latest group of arrivals included students from 12 different species, including 3 humans from Earth. Among them was a young woman named Lim Ji-won, who looked just as nervous as Minho had felt on his first day. "As is our tradition," Instructor Kalen announced, "we have a challenge for our new students. But today, instead of working alone, you will work in teams." They divided the students into mixed groups, each containing members from different species. Each team was given a different type of problem that required multiple perspectives to solve. Minho watched as the teams struggled at first, with members trying to impose their own cognitive approaches on the problems. But gradually, they began to listen to each other and find ways to combine their different strengths. The Altarian students provided logical frameworks. The Zephyrians identified patterns. The crystalline beings handled complex calculations. And the humans found unexpected connections between different approaches. Most importantly, they were learning that diversity of thought was not a barrier to overcome, but a resource to leverage. After class, Ji-won approached Minho with a familiar expression of confusion and excitement. "I heard about what you did with the puzzle box," she said. "Do you think all humans can do things like that?" Minho smiled. "I think all beings can do amazing things when they have the right environment and support. The puzzle box was not really about being human. It was about being willing to try something different. And what happens now? What is the future for humans in the galaxy?" Minho looked around the classroom, where students from a dozen species were cleaning up their collaborative work areas, chatting and laughing together despite their differences. I think the future is not about any single species proving they are the best, he said. I think the future is about all of us learning to think together. As they walked out of the classroom, Minho touched his grandfather's watch and thought about how much had changed since that first day. He had come to the academy to learn about other species and other worlds. Instead, he had learned something much more important, that the greatest discoveries come not from any one mind working alone, but from different minds working together, to expand what is possible. The instructor had offered a puzzle box, and the human had solved it quickly. But what they had really solved together was the puzzle of how different ways of thinking could combine to create something greater than the sum of their parts. And that, Minho realized, was the most human thing of all.